Greetings and grace. Ooh, we talking about it today. We are talking about the fall of Solomon, the wisest to ever lived. Hold on, let's see if it, as long as it doesn't fall. If it doesn't fall or whatever, then I'll rock with it today. Does that look good, y'all? All right, let me know how the sound is. All right, so we're gonna be reading from First Kings chapter 11. Let me get there. So if you know the story of Solomon, he's one of David's sons, and we literally did the Book of Solomon, Songs of Solomon, and I shared a lot of stuff. I shared my perspective on who he is and like a lot of his mindset because there was a lot of stuff that I felt as though he was going through mentally, because I don't feel as though he really ever had to work for anything. He just everything just kind of was just like but he didn't really put much effort into like his inner nor his outer, because I mean he even says nothing was denied, and so I'm like, was he ever rejected or anything like that? Did he ever experience hardship or failure to where he actually experienced success after failing so many times? Because there's something special and something beautiful about that. So let's get on into it. And y'all, getting back into working out. I was like, hold on a second. Let me go ahead and get back into working out. I need to work out. And so I did 2 miles today, and I'm excited about that because that was really good. I am very sleepy, but we're gonna get that energy back up where it needs to be. Excuse me. Whew. All right, pardon me, y'all. We're gonna make it through. We're gonna make it through. So First Kings chapter 11 starts off with Solomon's wives. King Solomon, however, loved many foreign women besides Pharaoh's daughter: Moabites, Ammonites, Ammonites. Yeah, they still rocking and rolling. Yeah, that's wild, man. Uh, Edomites, Sidonians, and Hittites. They were from nations about which the Lord had told the Israelites, "You must not intermarry with them, because they will surely turn your hearts after their gods." Nevertheless, Solomon held fast to them in love. He had 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines, and his wives led him astray. Yo, that's next level wide. All right. I mean, let's really talk about it for a moment. The reality of the situation is there's something to be said about we are the sum total of 5 people we hang around with. So 700 and 300, that's a lot to keep up with. I mean, I know there's some people that, they into polygamy, polyamory, and everything like that. I mean, do your thing, if everybody's in agreement and everything like that. But ain't no way all these women really had, what I'm saying, his best interest at heart. And that's a lot, man. I feel like that's a lot to give your soul away to, you know what I'm saying? Soul ties are a real thing. You gotta be careful. I mean, how many kids did he end up having though? I do kind of wonder that. Like, how many kids came from Solomon's, like, just reign and everything like that? Okay, getting back to it. Verse number 4. As Solomon grew old, his wives turned his heart after other gods, and his heart was not fully devoted to the Lord God as the heart of David his father had been. Now, we talked about David recently too. And remember, David, even with all of the things that David did, you know what I'm saying? God still favored him. God still loved him. Like King David, like King David is an OG without a doubt. You know what I'm saying? So verse 5, he followed Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and Melech, the detestable god of the Ammonites. So Solomon did evil in the eyes of the Lord. He did not follow the Lord completely, as David his father had done. On a hill east of Jerusalem, Solomon built a high place for Chemosh, the detestable god of Moab, and for Molech, the detestable god of the Ammonites. He did the same for all his foreign wives who burned incense and offered sacrifices to their gods. The Lord became angry with Solomon because his heart had turned away from the Lord, the God of Israel, who had appeared to him twice. Although he had forbidden Solomon to follow other gods, Solomon did not keep the Lord's commands. So the Lord said to Solomon, since this is your attitude and you have not kept my covenant and my decrees which I commanded you, I will most certainly tear the kingdom away from you and give it to one of your subordinates. Nevertheless, for the sake of David your father, I will not do it during your lifetime. I will tear it out of the hand of your son. Yet I will not tear the whole kingdom from him, but will give him one tribe for the sake of David, my servant, and for the sake of Jerusalem, which I have chosen. Y'all, man, you don't let, man, we're gonna talk about it, but because I mean, we're talking about, we got to stop sabotaging ourselves, and this is history, right? And we can learn from it. This is another part. This is a type of wisdom that you can gain without actually having to experience it, but you can actually learn from it, right? So Solomon's adversaries. Then the Lord raised up against Solomon an adversary, an adversary, Hadad the Edomite from the royal line of Edom. Earlier, when David was fighting with Edom, Joab, the commander of the army who had gone up to bury the dead, had struck down all the men in Edom. Joab and all the Israelites stayed there for 6 months until they had destroyed all the men in Edom. But Hadad, still only a boy, fled to Egypt with some of the Edomite officials who had served his father. They set out from Midian and went to Paran. Then, taking people from Paran with them, they went to Egypt, Pharaoh, king of Egypt, who gave Hadad a house and land and provided him with food. Pharaoh was so pleased with Hadad that he gave him a sister of his own wife, Queen Tahpenes, in marriage. The sister of Tahpenes bore him a son named Genubath, whom Tahpenes brought up in the royal palace, where there Genubath lived with Pharaoh's own children. While he was in Egypt, Hadad heard that David rested with his ancestors and that Joab, the commander of the army, was also dead. Then Hadad said to Pharaoh, let me go so that I may return to my own country. What have you lacked here that you want to go back to your own country? Pharaoh asked. Nothing, Hadad replied, but do let me go. And God raised up against Solomon another adversary, Rezon, son of Eliada, who had fled from his master, Hadadezer, king of Zobah. When David destroyed Zobah's army, Rezon gathered a band of men around him and became their leader. They went to Damascus, where they settled and took control. Rezon was Israel's adversary as long as Solomon lived, adding to the trouble caused by Hadad. So Rezon ruled in Aram and was hostile toward Israel. Jeroboam rebels against Solomon. Yeah, this joint's wild, man. Also, Jeroboam, son of Nebat, rebelled against the king. He was one of Solomon's officials, an Ephraimite, and Zereda, and his mother was a widow named Zeruah. Oh shoot, Shabuya. Roll call, yeah, because this joint is like a roll call. All these names. Here is the account of how he rebelled against the king. Solomon had built the terraces and had filled in the gap in the wall of the city of David his father. Now Jeroboam was a man of standing, and when Solomon saw how well the young man did his work, he put him in charge of the whole labor force of the tribes of Joseph. About that time, Jeroboam was going out of Jerusalem, and Ahijah, the prophet of Shiloh, met him on the way, wearing a new cloak. The two of them were alone out in the country, and Ahijah took hold of the new cloak he was wearing and tore it into 12 pieces. Then he said to Jeroboam, take 10 pieces for yourself. This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. See, I am going to tear the kingdom out of Solomon's hand and give you 10 tribes. But for the sake of my servant David and the city of Jerusalem, which I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel, he will have one tribe. I will do this because they have forsaken me and worshipped Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, Chemosh, the god of the Moabites, and Molech, the god of the Ammonites, and have not walked in obedience to me, nor done what is right in my eyes, nor kept my decrees and laws as David, Solomon's father, did. But I will not take the whole kingdom out of Solomon's hand. I have made him ruler all the days of his life for the sake of David, my servant, whom I chose and who obeyed my commands and decrees. I will take the kingdom from his son's hands and give you 10 tribes. I will give one tribe to his son, so that David, my servant, may always have a lamp before me in Jerusalem, the city where I chose to put my name. However, as for you, I will take you and you will rule over all that your heart desires, and you will be king over Israel. If you do whatever I command you and walk in obedience to me and do what is right in my eyes by obeying my decrees and commands, as David my servant did, I will be with you. I will build you a dynasty as enduring as the one I built for David, and I will give Israel to you. I will humble David's descendants because of this, but not forever. Solomon tried to kill Jeroboam, but Jeroboam fled to Egypt, to Shishak the king, and stayed there until Solomon's death. Solomon's death, and these are the last couple of verses. As for the other, excuse me, as for the other events of Solomon's reign, all he did and all the wisdom he displayed, are they not written in the book of the Annals of Solomon? Solomon reigned in Jerusalem over all Israel 40 years. Then he rested with his ancestors and was buried in the city of David his father, and Rehoboam his son succeeded him as king. So, okay, there's a lot to unpack, but we're just going to focus on the main aspects. All right. So, not too long ago, we talked about King Saul. King Saul was anointed king before David. And King Saul was supposed to actually take out the Ammonites. If you guys go back a few, you know, oh, dropping stuff, excuse me. If you go back just a few videos, talk about King Saul. And King Saul ended up losing his title to King David because David was anointed, and King Saul grew very jealous of David and everything like that because David, young kid, and he was just out here doing the thing, saying anointed by God, rocking things out. And King Saul even tried to take David out a couple of times, but David's life was continuously spared, because he just kept, seeking after God. He took ownership, and he was just like, man, God, I love you and everything like that. A worshiper, man after God's own heart. And God continuously favored him, which is awesome. And even when the stuff that David did, God still favored him. Now then comes Solomon not too long after that. Solomon, the wisest, what I'm saying? He asked for wisdom, he got it, but he still made foolish decisions. So that just goes to show that we can be the smartest person, we can be the wisest person in the entire world, but guess what? We can still be susceptible to making just foolish decisions. You know what I'm saying? Like, God literally told him, do not marry these other women. And he did. He did. He decided to have a bunch of them. And you know what I'm saying? He allowed what he allowed, and that affected his, legacy. And that's the whole point, right? If we aren't careful, we can sabotage not just our lives, but our legacy. And so this is why it's important to make sure that we are fully counting the costs, adding up the pros and cons, that type of jazz when we make especially big decisions, because we want to make sure that they're sustainable and that our legacy won't be affected in a negative way to the very best of our ability. That is our responsibility as an adult. You know what I'm saying? Whether you have children or not, or whether and if you don't have them, you can still prepare for them later on. You can prepare to do the best you can now, preparing for what you have coming up with your legacy. You got to know what it is that you want. You know what I'm saying? And so I just want to encourage you guys to don't do what Solomon did. Yes, gain wisdom, gain understanding, you know what I'm saying? Gain perspective, all of those things, but do your very best to make sure that you are staying obedient to God, or, whatever your faith is, saying, you already know, y'all know where I stand. So I'm gonna say, stay obedient to God to the very best of your ability. Try to do what it is that you got to do, and stay focused with all the things that you got to stay focused with, because you know what? It's not worth it. Not doing the other things. It's not worth it. And you don't want your legacy to be affected as a result of your decisions. And so when you start to think about it like that, it takes things to a whole nother level. It makes things more serious because you're starting to apply the right kind of pressure. Because we're not just here just to be here. Yeah, we can live our lives that way, but it's kind of, kind of on the side of fantasy or naivety, because we all still have responsibilities, and they're going to be there. Like the moment we hit 18, you know what I'm saying? The responsibilities, they're going to be there, and we got to make a decision. What you going to do with them? They're not gonna go away. You know what I'm saying? So be encouraged. And it's wild because when I was reading this, and this is the first time I read it, not live with you guys, but I read it, earlier, a little bit earlier today. And the first thing that came to my mind when he said the Ammonites, or the Ammonites. However, look, I don't know how to say all of these titles and names and everything like that, but King Saul was supposed to take out that nation. That was God's command to him. Maybe there are a bunch of demons running around. I don't know. I don't know the history behind the Ammonites, but them and then these other nations I'm not sure of and everything like that, but it's it's a different time, man. And that was definitely a different time. And yeah, you can be wise, but still make foolish decisions. That's the whole point. And a foolish decision can sometimes sabotage your legacy. So be encouraged to really think about it deeper because we want to make sure that we're taking care of the future. You know what I'm saying? And as someone who is a generational curse breaker, you know what I'm saying? We are like, okay, we got to do things differently all the way. You know what I'm saying? I mean, of course, there's going to be a couple of things that may be, but really, for the most part, we doing things completely different all the way for the future. And that's the whole point, right? We absorb what we're supposed to absorb, and then we make a decision to change for the better, for the future. And when you start to think about legacy like that, you don't make too many, impulsive decisions. They're well thought out, and you're also looking within. You're looking within yourself, which is important. And when the more you do that, the more you find your principles, the more you know what it is that you actually want long term. Like, I can't tell you how many people don't know what they want, and I'm just like, boo, you got to know what it is that you want. You got to know what makes you happy. You got to know what your principles are, because if you're trying to, if you're working towards marriage, for an example, you got to be able to communicate those things with the potential person that you're talking with. Especially if you're talking about marriage, you're talking about children, that type of jazz. You don't want to just, boom, have children and then figure it out as you go. I mean, yeah, you can, but there's a lot of stress that can come with that. And for those of us who have grown up, you know what I'm saying, in the struggle, we've experienced some things. I mean, doesn't it make more sense to figure out as much as you can, develop all the skills that you can, you know what I'm saying, to know as much as you can so that in the event of anything, you can pivot quickly because you have the skill set, because you have the knowledge and the wisdom, and you know what you need to do to reduce stress. Because stress is not fun. Stress is a killer. You know what I'm saying? Stress just drives a wedge, and you got to do the best that you can to protect your union, even before being unified, not unified, unified. I think unified is the right word. So be smart, be wise, stay faithful, stay obedient to what God has called, and do your best to not sabotage your legacy. All right, so God bless, stay safe. You already know what it is. I'll see you guys tomorrow.